Everyone, open your Bibles this morning to Hebrews 11:1. Now, faith is being sure of what we hope for, being convinced of what we do not see. Really? I mean, I'm all up for being optimistic, but are we just supposed to believe everything that's said to us because we're supposed to believe everything that isn't observable? In other verses, they tell us to live by faith and not by sight. So is the Bible condoning living in a fantasy? I don't think we should really live by faith. I mean, the evidence is going to lead where it leads. And if something isn't able to be detected by realistic means, then what's the point in believing it? If you think that we should live by faith and that we should believe in things that we can't see, call us because the show is starting now. Welcome to Talk Heathen. Today is Sunday, August 6th, 2023. I'm your host, Dr. Ben, and joining me today is the one and only Christy Powell. How are you doing today, Christy?
Hey, I'm doing great. I had a very rare and precious weekend home alone to myself, and so I am well rested and shot out of a cannon this morning. Let's do it.
Amazing. I'm super excited to be on a show with you, and I can't believe it's August already. I feel like part of this year just flew by. I mean, maybe it's just me, but it still feels like June to me.
I gotta say, this summer is dragging on here in Texas, where really everywhere where we're having historically record-breaking heat. Climate change isn't real, right? I guess this summer has felt very long for me, is what I'm trying to get to. I'm quite ready for the fall.
Yeah. Oh, I'm an autumn person as well. But hopefully, it's funny seeing our different perspectives here. Maybe I'm just so busy. But if anybody wants to talk with us about the weather or anything, just kidding. Please don't call in to talk about the weather. But this is a call-in show and we have open lines. So if you want to call in, now is a great time. Talk Heathen is a product of the atheist community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And like I said, Talk Heathen is a call-in show, and we have open lines. So get your calls in at 512-991-9242 or from your computer at tiny.cc/callth. And what happens a lot of times is people will call in near the end of the show, and we don't get as much time to talk with you. So if you really have a burning question you want to ask, call in ASAP, because the sooner we get you on the show, probably the more time we'll have to have that discussion. But in the meantime, we do have our famous segment, Talk Heathen to Me. And I want to find out what you all said in the comments for last week's question. So last week we asked you, wrong answers only, why is God hiding from us? And our top 3 answers were pretty good. So in third place from this past week was J. Ray Redden, says, don't predators always hide from their prey? Which this is a great one, seeing as kind of what we're going to be talking about in a little bit. But what are your thoughts on this one, Christy?
I mean, it hits. I appreciate a little bit of snark early in the day, like at the beginning of the broadcast. I'm here for it.
And number 2 is Jason Katz, that says, God isn't hiding. He just goes to a different universe. In Canada, you wouldn't know him.
Solid work.
I love this one. The your girlfriend in Canada that you
right.
Yeah.
She couldn't come. She's busy modeling. She couldn't make it to this middle school dance.
Yeah, I promise. She's absolutely real. Just she lives in Canada and goes to a different school and all of that. And in first place, we have Scottishire saying, why is God hiding from us? He owes Mary 2,000 years in child support. He wholly ghosted her. There are multiple.
That's a twofer joke.
Right. Like there are multiple puns in here, and I love this. Any other thoughts on this one?
I only that this is great work, and I really appreciate everything that the audience puts together on these. This has been a really fun segment for the last several months.
Oh, yeah. The creativity in the comment section is absolutely amazing. And if you have some humor or some snark that you want us to read out on the air, if you're one of the top 3 chosen from this next week's Talk Heathen to Me segment, then your name and your comment will be read on the screen. So the prompt for next week is, what is a prayer request that would raise eyebrows in a place of worship? So if you have an answer to this question, put your best answer below in the comment section, not in the side chat, because we won't read it there, in the comment section below after this goes uploaded after the show today. And next week, we'll reveal the top 3 answers. But in the meantime, I want to ask Christy, what is a prayer request that would raise eyebrows in a place of worship?
You know, I got to be honest with you. I had a hard time coming up with anything that I wanted to put forward because my first thought was all of these sort of gossipy bits. And then I realized that going to Christian schools and being in the church for most of my adolescence, that's all prayer requests were. Anytime you were asking other people to pray for something in a group setting, it was always really just a way of sort of pointing the finger at, oh, my poor friend Sally, like, can we all pray, dear Lord, that she stopped being a terrible person and apologize for the things she said to me? It was just gossipy bullshit. And so with that in mind, I came up with another one. And then I realized this is an actual prayer that I used to pray all the damn time. But my thought was, dear Lord, if it be within your will, please make the Bible make any amount of damn sense whatsoever. Because that is something I used to pray all the time. And yet, if you think about it, kind of ridiculous that we would need some magical force to come in and make the perfect inerrant word of God mean something.
Right. That's absolutely true. And I think I've had similar prayers in the past related to that. And I think, I mean, as much as we normally give very funny answers to these kinds of questions, I think it's very telling just, I mean, how realistic this answer is and how many of us in this community have had similar prayers like that. If God really wanted us to understand what was being said to us, and if he cared about getting any of us to heaven, if that's the end goal, then shouldn't we have clearer instructions and not have to wonder why none of it makes sense?
Yeah, no, he says, faith comes from hearing and from hearing the word of the Lord. But I spent a lot of time listening to it. And apparently you also need to get some sort of divine intervention. You also need to be in fellowship. Like there are all these things that you have to do to make the words on the page make any sense. And, that's the only book I've ever felt that way about. Right? Like I've never picked up any textbook or any other piece of fiction or anything else and thought to myself, if only the Lord would reveal to me what these words mean rather than, like a dictionary.
Right. And that's something we hear from a lot of religious leaders and devout religious practitioners, is that like, well, you're just an atheist because you don't understand this book and you haven't prayed for it to be revealed to you, or like you don't meet certain criteria for it to be revealed to you. Like, but then what's the point at all? Like if I don't have a chance at all to understand what's being said to me, and you need that understanding in order to be a believer, then why are you even trying to convert me in that case? Because apparently there's no chance that it's going to happen.
Yeah, no, fair to say. And there's no other place in life that we use this skill. Like, however we want to define faith, and we want to talk about trust and all these different things that can get kind of convoluted and pulled together, there's no aspect of my daily life that I have to take on faith or pretend makes sense when it just truly doesn't. And I think getting over that particular mind hurdle is probably the most problematic or challenging aspect of deconstructing your faith.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. All very great answers for this question this week. So if you have a similar answer, or if you want to even debate any of those answers, you can do that in the comments below. And I hope to see some really good top 3 answer choices for next week.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like we have a call coming in from a theist. And I'm very excited for this one. So I think this kind of goes along a little bit with what we were already talking about. So let's talk to, is it Stephan or Stephen? I want to make sure I pronounce your name right, from Iowa. And it sounds like you want to talk about the importance of faith. Stephan? Okay, awesome. Stephan, you are live on Talk Heathen. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, I just wanted to talk about how faith is important in the regards of like our identity, right? As individuals. I think that if God exists and he's real and he's infinite, that if we were created in his image, that we have value, right? So if it starts there,
if we accept all those
that
conclusions,
concept,
sure.
right. And as far as the evidence is concerned, that's just different people's perspective on what they see and how they grow in life and what they like. What I see right now is nature, and I see things. I see beauty, right? And so certain things I don't think fall into the evolutionary narrative, as far as like forgiveness, for instance. I don't really understand on a social construct how the evolutionary process can explain things like forgiveness, right?
Ooh, I can really jump into that. There's a lot to be said there, but I want to not just tear apart all of your individual premises, because you've already laid out 4 or 5 things that I might disagree with. What is sort of the central pillar of your call, though? Because rather than getting distracted by each plank, what is your kind of basic conclusion? That because forgiveness exists,
like,
because
I'm talking like
beautiful, there must be a God?
Yeah, if my worldview starts with God, then I believe myself to have value, and faith will then become important. And learning how to trust something greater than myself, which is part of faith, is also important. Because if I believe that I was, and I'm not trying to be like, say this the wrong way, but if I'm an overgrown, evolved bacteria, I don't think there's any real justification for doing anything right or wrong. It would really be kind of pointless, and there wouldn't be much purpose to life, right?
Well, I kind of wanted to jump in, and I feel like there's a false dichotomy happening here within kind of your initial argument of saying that basically, like, we can have forgiveness, we can have faith in these things, like, or the alternative is like believing in evolution. And it's like, these are not really dichotomous, and there's nothing related to evolution within our talk about faith and forgiveness. Like, none of that has anything to do with evolution. Like, can I kind of understand a little bit what your understanding of evolution is?
Yeah, I'll do my best to explain it. Like, I do understand, and I do believe in evolution, by the way. I do believe in it. Because, if I believe that God is beyond, time. So it's really a process that doesn't matter to God, but it was a process that we were involved in. But I believe that, so I've heard lots of different, like Richard Dawkins and things like that, try to explain how the reason we have love and all these things is so that we can reproduce, and that, evolution is a selfish process that involves survival, right? And so the only reason we care for each other is for the betterment of our survival and our reproduction. And
so I think
that's flawed, because
that's only true in aggregate, but please go ahead.
Yeah, I think our framing is a little bit problematic, because like I primarily want to push back on the idea that there's an intention to evolution, or that there's an intention to love and an intention to these other processes, because I think that adds some bias to the equation of saying that like there is some reason for anything. I don't think that there's any reason to anything, especially when talking about evolution.
Sure.
It's a process, and there are results, and there are certain things that are selected for. But when we say selected for, that's even a bit weird of language, because that kind of implies that there's some agency or intent. I don't know exactly what the best wording would be to describe it, but like it ends up being kind of cause and effect might be a better way to word it, where it's not that love directly like was intended to have organisms like reproduce, but the ones that ended up reproducing are the ones that are more likely to have their species survive. So therefore, we're going to see more of that species propagate in the future. So it's not that like this was a desired trait. It just happened to be what led to the propagation of the species. So could there be...
What I'm talking about is on a social perspective, like how we interact with each other and certain emotions that come from that kind of transcend evolution. And one of them would be forgiveness, right? And so, even like a soldier jumping in front of somebody and doesn't even know them and dying, sacrifice and things like that, which don't really account for that particular narrative that,
but
we
they
evolved
do,
and the reason
though.
we have these processes and things like that.
Yeah,
They
that's
do?
why I said it only makes
And-
sense in aggregate. Like, yes, if I were right now to go and jump in front of a speeding car in order to protect a bunch of orphans, that doesn't do anything to further my bloodline. So when we look at like one specific individual case in that sense, it causes something of a problem. But if we zoom out and think about it in aggregate, think about it with any sort of like larger millions of years evolutionary type perspective, we recognize that, oh, okay, a species that has an element where they're willing to jump in front of a car or push orphans out of the way is a species that is less likely to be, devoured by leopards and hyenas and everything else. We have to recognize that these things happen in a piecemeal fashion. And in the same way that we have these sort of like crude and now almost sort of quaint and cheesy evolutionary charts where you see, a chimp slowly begin to walk upright and eventually you get to some picture of a caveman. We can see those same sorts of things when we talk about a lot of different human emotions. Obviously, when we're talking about emotions and we're trying to analyze the behavior of animals who we can't actually speak to and get a proper understanding of their consciousness, we want to be really mindful about the way we anthropomorphize and the way that we project these things. But you can see, quote unquote, forgiveness in baboon troops, in elephant colonies, among orcas, among all kinds of big-brained and sophisticated animals. And you can see lower and lesser degrees of that as you go all the way down the evolutionary ladder. It makes sense that a sea turtle that lays 100 eggs
really come up with a good explanation for that, and I would say it would take a lot of faith to believe that all this is random, since all we've ever observed is order, really.
Well, Stephan,
it's not random.
I'm not talking about
things happen, and then some things happen to happen more often because they end up reproducing themselves.
Stephan, does a lack of an explanation make your belief system true?
No, I just think it puts us in the same boat. I think we both have to have faith in
So
things
then
that we
why-
don't really understand.
So then if we don't
But I
understand
do
something,
understand it,
how
Stephan.
does that, but even if you specifically don't understand something, why does that then call for a supernatural being to be present? Like why then are we jumping to faith and instead of just saying, I don't know?
Yeah, I mean, I get where you're coming from. I would say, as far as calling God supernatural, right? I really don't subscribe to that in a sense where I think God is necessary. I think he's not supernatural. He always was. He's a part of nature. He's also outside of nature, right? It's a concept of the creator of everything that we see, right? And know to be true. It's not whatever we can imagine God can do. Like a lot of people think, well, why didn't God do this and God do that? Well, that's really not reality, right? What we see in reality is that there's a lot of things we don't understand, like the infinite universe that we observe, the constants of the universe, which are actually pretty fine-tuned. If you actually talk to some scientists, if any one of those constants were changed or deducted in any way, life wouldn't exist.
That's not,
Right?
I reject that.
Gravity.
I reject that argument, Stephan.
But just talk to some scientists, Ben.
Yeah.
Stephan,
No, but
I have to really say, like, you
I've
sound
watched debates
incredibly
on it.
incredulous. You're sitting here accusing me of not understanding the thing that I am trying very patiently to slowly and gently explain to you. I am not a biologist. I am not an expert in ethology. I'm not especially qualified to sit here and explain evolution to you. But I understand why a sea turtle that lays 100 eggs doesn't need to have the same emotional capacity for caring for their young as a chimpanzee who only has one baby maybe every 5 years. Like, it makes sense that we would end up working through these different systems, and we can see piecemeal how we can go from one system to another system and why one system might propagate more effectively than another one. To say that we don't understand that is just kind of lazy. You can't just wave your hand and say, well, it's all made up, and so I can make up whatever I want to make up, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I get where you're coming from. I'm just saying there's things we don't understand. I'm not saying that what you just explained to me, I don't understand. I'm saying that there's things beyond that that we still don't understand. And so,
yeah, and 100 years ago, we barely understood any of the evolutionary stuff I'm talking about. And 100 years before that, we
and that
had
will
no
change
notion
through time.
of it. Yeah,
Right.
and
So then
100
in the
years from now, we'll have a
meantime,
better understanding of abiogenesis and the founding of the universe and everything else. In the meantime, why are you insisting that my God isn't the God from the Bible or the God that has this power or that power? My God is just the thing that fills in all the stuff I don't understand. I mean, what does that even mean? If I don't understand it, therefore God?
I mean, yeah, in a sense, right? I mean, it's the only explanation because we've never observed nothing creating something. And
it's not an explanation. It's just a way of describing something you don't understand.
Hey, Stephan, how many universes have you seen created?
Okay.
Stephan, how many universes have you seen?
Well, I don't believe in a multiverse. I don't believe it.
So,
do you believe in a multiverse?
So have you seen?
I don't know. So hold on. I've got a specific reason why I'm asking these questions. So how many universes do we know of, for sure?
We only know of this one, but in
right. So how many
sciences we think that there's multi-universe?
So if we're doing if we're talking about probability, like I kind of want to go back to the thing that you said, like if one thing was off, then life wouldn't exist. And I reject your fine-tuning claims. But there's a big problem with your arguments here in that when we're doing any kind of study, right? Like do you understand statistical power? Does that statement mean anything to you?
It does, but you can elaborate if you like.
Okay, so let me explain a little bit. So let's say I have a six-sided die, right? And I roll it one time, and the number comes up to be 6. Yeah. And I say, well, the number is 6, and that's the only thing that can be rolled. If I roll this die, it's going to be 6 because I've only seen it be a 6. You'd probably look at me and you'd say, yep. Wait, hold on. You need to roll it more than one time in order to see what other options you're going to get. I was like, no, but I rolled it this one time and I rolled a 6. Like, so here's what happens with the universe. Like we have one instance of all this happening, right? We have n equals 1. So can we even make any determinations about probability based on that? I'd argue no, we really can't. And this isn't a case necessarily where we can just re-roll the die because we have no power over just re-rolling the universe and seeing what's going to happen, right? So the most we can do at this point is say
a multiverse, which would require faith.
Well, we can hypothesize,
which would first require faith.
Stephan, no, we can hypothesize, but we cannot draw any conclusions because we cannot determine statistical significance. The more times you're able to roll that die, the more accurately you're able to determine probability. So my argument here is that you cannot determine probability based on the data that we're given. So these arguments of, well, this is the way the universe would be if X, Y, Z changed. Those are all hypotheses. We don't have a way to test them. We have no way to determine the actual experimental probability. Like, do you understand that there's a difference between theoretical science and experimental science?
No, I totally, yeah, I do. And that's actually
right. So we can't. So it's kind of disingenuous to say that because I disagree with this theoretical science, then this is what the experimental outcome would be, because we don't know. And that's as far as we can get. And so like a lot of the arguments you're making just don't really have grounds to be able to make conclusions from them.
Right. I made the conclusion, right, because of my faith. But it's like I understand.
Right. So I don't think you can make that conclusion. So that's the problem. You're starting with a conclusion, and that's perfectly
fine if you don't believe
it. Right. No. So why are you starting with the conclusion? Stephan, are you listening to me? Why are you starting with the conclusion instead of starting with a question? Why are you starting with the conclusion?
I already I'm a theist. I have a conclusion. You know, I have.
But why did you start?
How'd you get there?
Do you start with a conclusion for anything else in your life? Do you just assume things and then operate based on what your assumption was?
I originally thought that there wasn't a God, actually, for a very long time. I'm not going to get into my personal life.
So what convinced you?
That have happened.
So what convinced you that
I'm
that
sure
your God
on
is
the
true?
radio station you probably don't want to hear about my testimony, but I can tell you, you know.
No, I don't necessarily want your testimony, but I want your evidence. Like, what convinced you that this is the correct conclusion?
Okay, so I'll give you this short as possible. I didn't believe in God. I had my grandfather was a street preacher, like a evangelist. No one else in my family was Christian. He gave me a Bible. He said, read it. Okay, I put it in the seat next to me on my vehicle. The day before, I said, okay, God, if you're real, just reveal yourself to me. Said a little small prayer. I didn't really believe it was going to happen. I was actually on my way back from the strip club with my brother because that's what he did on his free time. He liked to take me there. I was driving home, and the ignition light went off on my car. I pulled off to the side of the road. Car started smoking. Got out immediately. Fire all the way through the front. My entire car burned up completely. The metal was bent. That's how hot it was. Okay. Everything in my car burned, including the seat that my Bible was sitting on and my golf clubs. That's how hot it was. I went back to the vehicle after the sheriff pulled up. I grabbed my Bible, and it was the only thing that survived. It was sitting on a metal seat. I went up to the sheriff and I told him this was the only thing I could salvage. And then I asked him his name, and he said, Officer Gentile. So after that point, I had a couple things. You know, I started to think, well, this was probably a huge coincidence. But there was a lot of things that happened after that convinced me that it wasn't. So that's why I decided to turn my life over. And so me and my grandfather started having some Bible studies, and that's what changed me ultimately. So, yeah, that's the end of my story, though.
Christy,
I might have already got blocked. I'm not.
Okay. No, not at all. I mean, really what I'm hearing you say is not at all dissimilar from what Ben was pointing out about, you know, the law of large numbers and just basic statistics. Like, I'm glad that you were safe in that situation, but it kind of feels like you said a prayer to God one time, you rolled the die, and you ended up landing on a natural 20. But that doesn't mean that every time you roll it, you're going to end up with that same result. And I would even challenge you to think back. Were there times where you kind of thought, well, maybe there is a God? Did you ever say any sort of prayer ever about, hey, God, if you're real, come and show me, or whatever else? And were those answered? I mean, when you start looking at the selection bias and everything else, it does feel really thin. And I appreciate the value and the significance of a personal story like that. I'm certainly not trying to take that away from you, but it doesn't seem like a very reasonable or rational way to gather truth.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Like I said, if it was a ginormous coincidence that the officer's name was Officer Gentile and that, you know, my Bible was sitting on a metal seat, and usually I understand the process of physics and, like, you know, books burn, right? Especially if it's on a metal seat that's been burned. That just got me. I'm sorry. I was just like, God is real. Like, if I don't look at this as God telling me something, and then I started doing my own studies, and that was it. But yeah,
Stephan,
I don't have really anything else. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, which God did you pray to?
Well, I prayed the God of the Bible. Right?
Which God of the Bible?
Because my grandfather's.
Which God of the Bible?
Jesus.
Okay, so specifically the Christian God. So I've heard similar stories from Muslims, and why should I believe your story that God was saving you, and specifically the Christian God was saving you, versus a Muslim friend that says that Allah had saved them from something similar? Yeah.
Well, technically, Muslims, and I'm not discrediting them, they do believe in the God of the Bible, or at least they subscribe to the God of the Bible and the old book. If you understand,
tell that to a Muslim.
Yeah, but they would probably disagree with you, like Christy is saying.
In the Bible.
Well, they would not agree that Christ is God. So there's at least some distinct differences between your God and theirs, and many Muslims would disagree that you're following the same God, and in the fact that the gods even looking at the Old Testament are interpreted to be very different. The character of each god is very distinctly different. But even let's say if I had a Hindu friend that said that they were saved by one of their gods, why should I believe you and not them?
Well, I mean, obviously I can't answer that. I don't know. I respect Hindu culture. I don't think that God came to die to take away people's culture. One, I don't believe that he ever said anything about our culture. We still put up Christmas trees, and that's pagan, right? It's just our culture. It's what we do. So
but if somebody said
like that, what God's concerned about.
But if somebody gave a very similar story to you and said that they were convinced they weren't a Hindu and then they became a Hindu because they believed they were saved from some accident because of this deity, would you say that their belief was correct and that's a good reason to then become a Hindu?
I mean, if someone proposed that to me, I wouldn't personally, because it wasn't my own testimony. I don't know how I'd feel. I'd probably be 50-50 as far as like what I believed, right?
But they can't, your story and their story can't both be true, right?
Sure. No, do I believe that there's forces out there and angelic beings that call themselves God, like Zeus and Thor? You know, the Bible talks about like idol spirits.
Yeah, so you think that some people's beliefs are false. Some people's faiths are false.
I would say that the entity they believe in may be real, right? But then they create a story based on their own spirit, like Thor, which would be like wrath, right?
So how do we know?
Things like that.
So Stephan, how do we know that yours isn't one of those false ones?
Well, now we're getting into the source, right? Like we're getting very to the beginning of how, why.
No, so we're getting into evidence. I need some evidence.
Yeah.
Because like, again, people can say whatever they want. They can say that they believe in a certain thing, like, and they can say that their story is a certain way. And I'm not discounting your experience, but I question whether your interpretation of your experience is correct. Right. That's what I'm questioning. If you look at the Old
Testament, and I know you've probably read it, right? If you look at all the stories in the Old Testament, I mean, literally from Abraham sacrificing his promised son, or at least going to sacrifice his promised son, a picture of the father sacrificing his son. You have the Passover, the blood of the lamb that's put over. You have Psalms 22, which talks about, I'm poured out like water. They pierced my hands and my feet. This was written like 600 years before the act of crucifixion was even a thing.
People have been murdering each other forever. This is not exclusive to like the Old Testament or the New Testament.
If someone says they're piercing my hands and my feet, that's pretty detailed, right?
It's detailed, but people have known how to kill each other for a long time, and
it often involves piercing with sharp objects. That's and part of it.
Multiple cultures have found like the easiest ways to kill people, and the most torturous ways to kill people. I'm not convinced that like this is a good reason to say that your specific religion is the correct one because they knew how to murder people in a certain way, or like they talked about murdering people in a certain way. That's not convincing to me.
Right.
Really, Stephan, it all comes down to post hoc rationalization. Every single argument that you have made so far, whether we're talking about the fine tuning of the universe, the power of forgiveness, the beauty of trees, the safety of the Bible, I mean, everything that you've described has been, well, I saw a thing, so let me go back and try to explain that thing using this Jesus model. And I would just encourage you to think a little bit bigger, to realize that like one instance of an occurrence, one event somehow creates a narrative. You're just filling everything that you don't understand or don't like in with the word God. And yeah, that's valid. I'll let you have the last word. I haven't heard anything new or interesting other than I had an experience and I think God is the only way that it makes sense. And I would say to you that no one else is going to be compelled by that.
Okay, I would disagree on that in a particular level. I will say this, that there's one thing that is true in the Bible. One thing. And that is that love is sacrifice. And I don't know if you have a family or not, or if you have
That's not
kids or
exclusive
wife.
to the Bible, though.
Right.
That's not exclusive
Here's
to the
thing.
Bible.
The whole point is it's not exclusive. No, I would agree with that. But it is the fundamental principle of Christianity if you really dig into the gospel and what that is, right? Sacrifice.
I mean,
So we
depending on how
sacrifice
you interpret
our
it
families
and
every
everything
day.
else, we talk to different people every week
Yep.
who have really different ideas of what actually is or says or does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, based on personal experience, if you live long enough, you realize that love isn't just butterflies and rainbows, right? It's sacrifice, ultimately. And so the display on the cross was just that. It was sacrifice. And God displayed the highest point of love to us because he sacrificed for us. And I think that's good. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, Jesus spent a bad weekend and then went up to heaven and to live with the fathers. I don't know how much, I mean, yeah, crucifixion's like not a pleasant process by any means, but there are plenty of like humans who've been crucified and have stayed dead after that. So I don't know if Jesus really gave more than anybody else. Like, it seems like he got a pretty hefty reward for all of that. But there are plenty of normal people that are like still going to be executed and die and stay dead. And in a lot of Christians' worldview, going to hell afterwards. It seems like a lot of people are getting a worse deal than Jesus. So I don't know how much he actually sacrificed.
Right.
Certainly, he's not the only person to have ever loved or the only person to have ever sacrificed. I don't see any supernatural here. And Stephan, I don't mean to talk over you or to keep bumping into each other, but just to say, I haven't heard anything new. I haven't heard anything compelling. And I certainly wish you the best, but I would also very much ask you to lift your eyes up to the horizon a little bit, see the world a little bit more broadly, and stop looking at that single roll of the die.
Mm-hmm. And with that, I think, oh, go ahead, Stephan.
I mean, I'll take your advice. I respect your guys' opinion. I have no animosity. I think that you guys post some good points. And so, yeah, I mean, we'll leave it at that. I appreciate the time, though.
Yeah, and Stephan, I'd love for you to call back in sometime. I think you are very kind caller, and none of us yelled at each other. And I think this was, while we still disagree on a lot of things, I do think this was a worthwhile discussion to have, and I would like to have more discussions with you in the future. So I hope you'd be willing to call in again sometime.
Yeah, sounds good. Will do.
Yeah. Have a good rest of your Sunday.
All right, take care. Yep, same to you. Take care.
All right. Well, I'm getting hyped up after that first call. I know we have some other callers coming, but I'm very, very excited to tell you all about the upcoming annual Bat Cruise on Saturday, August 26, 2023. And we'd like to tell you, unfortunately, but also, I guess kind of cool, we got a lot of people showing up, but tickets have sold out. So unfortunately, you can't buy tickets at this time, but there's still a chance that you can join us. We have a wait list, and you can sign up for that in case there are any people that cancel. You could take that spot and get on the Bat Cruise. So to join the wait list, you can go to tiny.cc/batcruise. And if you already have tickets, you will get to join the ACA for a fun summer evening on the water, conversing with like-minded freethinkers like Forrest Valkai, J. Mike, Christy Powell, who's sitting right next to me.
Hey, I made the marquee.
And other hosts and crew from our various shows. So if you want to get in on that action, but you don't have tickets yet, you will need to get on the wait list. I'm sorry you weren't able to get your tickets in time, but we do this every year. So if you're not able to go this year, I highly recommend getting on those tickets as soon as they open for next year, because it really, really is a great time. I'd also like to talk about some other ways that you can support Talk Heathen and the ACA. We have some merch, and especially we have a new limited edition t-shirt that says Satan, the lesser of two evils. And you can get this one by visiting tiny.cc/merchaca to get them right now. And please like the video, subscribe to the channel, enable notifications, and comment below on your favorite caller. Become a channel member by clicking the join button below the video. You'll get custom chat emotes, and you'll help perpetuate the mission of Talk Heathen and the atheist community of Austin. You can also send a super chat, and we've got a couple that I'm going to read out in just a second. So you can ask a question or give a comment in a super chat, and we will get to as many as we can on the air live during the show. So if you want to ask a question but don't feel like you want to call in, you can send a super chat and get those in. So we've got a couple right now. From Greg Markowski, sends $5. Thank you, Greg. Again, I think the most frequent super chatter every week still goes to Greg Markowski. I will be making a plaque for you out of a paper plate or something in the future that we can put at the. I actually think I might do that. Send it to the studio, and if you ever happen to be at the library and can come pick it up, that'll be for you or whoever takes your place as the most frequent super chatter on the channel. But Greg says, thanks, guys. You make my Sunday chores go easier. And I'm glad that we could be here for you, Greg. Always happy to see you in the side chat. And we have another one from Ben9. And you have a great name because Ben is a fantastic name. Sends, of course, $9.99 and says, porn is naughty and sinful thought crime. And we got the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Or a dance with the devil, target goal, a happy ending without a god as a perverse voyeur. Yes, there.
I appreciate you working through the emojis. It's
yes. We definitely have some porn talk coming up. I'm very excited to.
All right, let's do it. It's been a couple of months since I've done secular sexuality, so I am all ready to talk to the internet about pornography. Who do you want to start with?
Yes, we're going to start with Laurie, her from Ohio, because I think she called in first. She's been waiting a little bit longer. Sure. And she wants to talk about pornography being a sin. Laurie, what are your thoughts? Laurie, you are live.
How are you? I'm doing
Hello.
Okay. I was just telling you that the sin is pornography because while lust and adultery aren't the same, they are both sinful. God wants our hearts, not just our obedience. We can say that pornography is a sin because it violates the character of God. As someone
so let's talk about that a little bit. I want to clarify a little bit. When you say that something is a sin, when we describe something as a sin and label yes sin, not a sin, we're not talking about what is good for us. We're not talking about what is healthy or harmful. When we say that something is a sin, we're talking specifically about the fact that God has declared that this is a bad thing to do, right?
Yes, it is. He wants us to turn away from sin.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't argue with you there. I am not going to disagree with the notion that God hates porn, except for in so much as does God exist and or have the capacity for hating things. We kind of have to go to the very beginning and figure out the whole, is there a God? How do you know and why? But if we are just operating from the premise that the God of the Bible is real, then yeah, sure, God hates porn, but like, why should Ben and I care? Because we don't believe that God is, let alone hates.
You know, I was once a sinner. I was lost. I did not believe in God. And here until I went to church and then I turned my whole life over to the Lord when I fully surrendered to him and accepted him as my Savior. When I confessed him as Lord and confessed my sins to him. And he cleansed me and he opened my eyes. My eyes are spiritually opened.
Yes. Okay. So you believe that there is a God and that God hates sin. Why should the rest of us care?
Because the God is true.
How do you know that?
He's the God of all that exists, like animals, everything that's alive, like trees, the air, us. You know, if God did not exist, we would not be here.
How do you know that?
He created us. He created us to serve him. That was the purpose.
You're just making claims. How do you know that?
Because the Bible speaks about it, and the Bible is true.
How do we know the Bible is true?
Because it's the evidence of things that I've not seen, but the evidence, it's all true. It's all true.
How do you know that?
It's by faith.
Okay, so do you know?
And knowing that God is true, even though of the evidence of the things I don't see, but I still believe.
Laurie, do you know what a circular argument is?
I don't know.
Right. So the argument that you've made is that God is true, and we know that God is true because the Bible says that God is true. And then how do we know that the Bible is true? Because I know the Bible is true. So you're not making any evidence. You're not providing any evidence that any of those are true. You're using it's kind of like a game of rock, paper, scissors, where like rock beats scissors, paper beats rock, and scissors beats paper. It's a whole circle, but nothing really tells us why any of those is actually true, right? You're just relying on the other thing instead of providing a reason to believe why those are true. Like there are plenty of, specifically taking the Bible for an example, there are plenty of other people that would make the same argument about their book. And we just kind of went over this with the last caller about like Muslims believe their book is true, and they probably say the same thing, that their book is true because they believe it to be true and because their God is real. So why should I believe your book and not their book?
Other gods before me.
And that's what it says.
If you're believing in Hindu or if you're believing in Muslim, that's other false god.
How do you know that those? The problem is though, you're just asserting that that's what your book says. I don't have any reason to believe that your book is correct. Right? Well, there's also books out there.
Well, what we read, because it would take us away from the true living word of God.
So if I have a book that tells me that hobbits are real, is that book true?
Hobbits.
Because it says that hobbits are real?
Not.
Yeah. Why? Why is my book not true?
Bibles, they're all serving Satan, no matter what. If it's other gods besides,
so Lord of the Rings is serving Satan.
They're all of Satan.
Is Lord of the Rings serving Satan? I wasn't aware of that.
Yes, it's true. They are of Satan. Of any other gods that are not.
Laurie, do not.
Okay,
Laurie,
maybe we agree with you, maybe we don't. But can you please just explain to me, how is it that you know that the Bible is true, but the Vedas is not, that the Quran is not, that the Lord of the Rings is not? What makes you feel, or how do you know that the Bible is the only one that's correct?
That Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And Jesus says, anyone who denies me, I would deny you before my heavenly Father.
Right. The Quran, the Vedas, these books also make similar claims that the God of the Bible isn't real. But the Bible says that the Bible is real. Who else says that the Bible is real other than the Bible?
Because I know God is real. That's why.
How do you know?
His word is true.
Yeah, because the Bible told us so. Faith comes from hearing. Laurie, we're back into our circular argument territory. I really appreciate where you're coming from, but we're 7 minutes deep, and so far I'm still hearing the Bible says so, and I know because the Bible says so, and it's true because the Bible says that it's true, and the Bible is true because the Bible says so. I would ask you to maybe think that through a little bit, maybe give us a try on another week. Yeah.
Yep, I would agree.
But can I tell you one verse about?
Please, one more thing. We'll let you have the last word.
18.
Can you repeat that?
It would be better for thee to enter into life halt or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet be cast into hell, into fire. And
so this says nothing.
Offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. It would be better for thee to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes be cast into hellfire. And that, now God does not mean for you to go cut your foot if you like, or your hand, like if you hit somebody. He doesn't mean that to cut it off. He means for you to turn away from the sin. And
yeah, see, we're still.
He means for you to stop watching the porn. That's why.
No, Laurie, we're still.
This is a long leap to God's mad about what I do in my private time. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off either, Ben. I just, Laurie, I appreciate you.
I think we need to move on.
I think we need to move on and maybe try some fresh ideas.
Yeah, we're gonna move on to some other callers. Laurie, I would strongly encourage you think about your reasoning of how you got to your position, and maybe as well, like you had started to talk about not being a believer before, and now you're a believer. Maybe next time if you call in, you can tell us what made you make that decision to switch, and that might be a more interesting call for the future. But in the meantime, I want to tell you all about something really cool, and that is we got a Patreon. I know a lot of you know about the Patreon, but every week we read off the top 5 patrons of the week, which we will read off later on in the show today. But if you want your name to be on that list, you can go to tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And we also have a channel that houses all of the shows in ACA audio podcast form. So if you want to listen to the show without seeing our faces, you can go to tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. You can also become part of the Talk Heathen community and our fan-run Facebook page at tiny.cc/FBTHG. And in case you didn't know, Talk Heathen has a TikTok, and we go there live before the shows on Sunday. And there's also, I think, some TikTok shows happening now throughout the week that some people from the ACA are putting on. So go subscribe and join that pre-show on Talk Heathen TikTok and some of the other shows during the week. I know Richard Gilliver, one of our regular hosts on the show, is very, very proud of the work that he's doing over there on the TikTok. So please go over there and watch that. It'll be a great time. And we have some more calls about porn. So I think we're
fuck yeah, let's do it.
I think we're just going to take a bunch of porn calls today. It's not very often that we get Christy and me together on a show. So I'm going to have a good time today and talk all about porn. So let's bring on, is it pronounced? I'm sorry, if I mispronounce anybody's names, feel free to correct me. Dre, him from Texas, wants to talk about porn is wrong. Dre, you are live on Talk Heathen. What is your argument?
I'm doing today firstly.
Hey, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yeah, it's Dre. It's Dre.
Dre, okay. Wanted to make sure. Yeah, Dre, what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to so now I saw the topic of discussion, and me coming from a theist perspective, I'm automatically assuming that porn is wrong. So I won't try to argue from a theistic point of view. I'll argue from a secular point of view.
Yeah, so when we say porn is wrong, like we talked to the last caller about how porn is, quote, sinful because God says it's bad, and I can't argue with that. But when you say it's wrong, what does that really mean? Does that mean that porn is harmful to people? Does that mean that porn is damaging in some way? Like, what does wrong mean in that sense?
Absolutely.
Absolutely what? Elaborate for me if you would.
It's absolutely damaging to people.
Okay. How do you know?
Because just from a historical standpoint, no society has ever been able to build upon a foundation of hedonism. So the act of putting pleasure first has always destroyed societies in history, throughout all of history. So I only say this because the reason I want to tie in how porn is damaging, because porn relies on the objectification and the commodification of sexuality, when sexuality is something that's personal and it's intimate. So
let me jump in right there, because I feel like that premise alone is enough to keep us talking all day. Why is porn only, or rather sex, why is sex only supposed to be about intimacy? Where is that written? Who declared that, and whose best interest did they have in mind? Obviously, you can have sex that is commodified. You can have sex that isn't intimate, and plenty of people do. So when you say you can't, what is it that you actually mean here?
I'm not saying that you can't. I'm just saying
but shouldn't maybe
the greater good. It doesn't serve the greater good of humanity. That's what I'm trying to argue.
Okay, I mean, how does me going and playing golf for 8 hours, how does that further humanity in any sort of useful or meaningful way? How is me playing golf any better for society than me masturbating to pornography for 8 hours?
Because the implications of golf being perverted are low. The implications of sex being perverted are high.
I mean,
and are
we're
dangerous.
talking about a sport that has a lot of classism. We're talking about a sport that has a huge environmental impact. I mean, golf can be really, really problematic to society.
Wait. The implications of sex being perverted is, for one, and this is a huge problem that we have. We have a problem with child pornography. We have a problem with sex trafficking, and we have a problem with rape. We have sex. The perversion of sex is totally different from the perversion of something like golf.
Golf isn't a perversion of nature. If we want to, take that point, like I'm still trying to figure out how pornography leads to any of the social ills that you're talking about. It reminds me at the start of the call when you were talking about how a society built on hedonism is going to be destroyed. And I have to ask, like, what society on a long enough timeline hasn't been destroyed? There have been plenty of societies throughout time and history and culture that have had quote unquote hedonism, that have had beautiful gardens, that have had vineyards for growing wine and all of these kinds of things. And eventually all of those societies get destroyed. Is that because they were too hedonistic? I mean, what do these things mean?
Yes, but personally, I want to say hedonism is a part of why you get destroyed, because I think when people become too obsessed with pleasure, they put their purpose on the back end, and infrastructure starts to crumble.
Yes. So if we all spent like 40 hours a week playing golf and none of us participated in life or were raising our children or educating ourselves or performing labor, then our society would crumble. Similarly, if we all decided to spend 40 hours a week watching pornography, our society would kind of crumble. But I'm struggling to figure out any differences here between pornography and golf.
If you want to be totally honest with yourself, golf is not nearly as fun as sex. It's not nearly as pleasurable. So that is the equivalency that you're trying to make. It doesn't.
We should only do boring stuff.
That sounds like a personal
God hates
opinion.
Happiness.
But like, let's take any hobby, and like going along the lines that Christy was saying, like, so I'm a doctor, right? So I do a lot of very important work for society throughout the week, and it gets very excessive sometimes. Like, there's a role in everybody's life for pleasure and for a little bit of hedonism, and we're not saying that. I don't think any of us here is going to say that your entire life should be based on just doing what's fun and abandoning what needs to be done to further humanity. None of us are making that assertion, but we're saying that sometimes it's a good idea for people to have outlets for social functions, outlets for sports, outlets for sexual pleasure. These are all necessary things for humanity. And I think Christy especially would advocate that, like, having your sexual needs met leads to humans in general being more productive in their society. So I don't think that, like, if we want to talk about like humans and their value to their society, I mean, that's a certain discussion, but that has nothing to do with whether or not the act of watching porn itself is problematic. Because what if somebody watches maybe for an hour a day and then is very productive in their life? Like, you can't have people only doing their job or people burn out, right?
But see, this is the barriers that comes from not being, for porn won't be obsessed. It kind of stems from its prohibition. So so from a theistic point of view, sin is something that you shouldn't do, right? But it's something that people do anyways. And it's something that people should feel bad for, because if they don't feel bad for it, they will do it without consequence. I know it's going to happen regardless. So people are desiring to have their sexual needs meant. It's something that's going to happen regardless. But we have the societal barriers. For instance, we got societal barriers because, okay, just for instance, if we did not have societal, I'm sorry, that was
let me jump in a little bit, Dre, because I feel like you might be struggling here. It really sounds like you had that experience that we all have at some point, where instead of our mom or dad telling us like, okay, you can have a cookie, but only one, we all had an experience at a certain age where mom wasn't looking, and we ate as many cookies as we possibly can, and then got sick from it and started to realize, oh, there was a good reason why mom said that there was a restriction on the number of cookies. What I'm hearing from you, Dre, what everything I have heard from you over the course of the last 10 minutes feels like it can be boiled down to, I'm worried that this cookie tastes so good that I can't trust myself and I shouldn't like it. And there's all of these ideas of what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing and what I'm going to do anyway, even though I shouldn't do it. And it all is just sort of this notion of being somehow unable to control yourself around the things that you enjoy. And because you don't think that golf is that particularly fun, you're not really worried about it. You don't really see golf as sinful. But porn, ooh, mama, is that something that's a lot of fun? And therefore, we have to be extra, extra careful about it. And then we bring in all of this like moralizing from God and everything else. Is there anything that I've said just now that you disagree with, or that doesn't actually encapsulate your argument up to this point?
No, it doesn't. I just want to say like one more thing, and I got to go back to work. But what I want to say is that if you look up actual statistics, you will know that a lot of sexual predators and people that have been guilty of sexual crimes, they follow it's a certain pipeline.
There's something
lots
else.
Of people committing lots of crimes. The biggest crimes in our country are
hold on, Dre,
golf.
because a lot of people that are committing a lot of these crimes are in religious institutions, and especially in positions of power in religious institutions. Just something thrown out there.
Yeah, if we're trying to profile people based on their hobbies, I am much more interested in the criminality of the top 1% of golfers in this country than the criminality of the top 1% of porn consumption in this country. Absolutely take that to the bank. I appreciate what you're saying, Dre, but when you say statistics, you are so far off course. You have no citation on that. And while I don't want to be pedantic or pick at any specific little thing, I have to just flat out reject this whole porn to predator pipeline philosophy that you're promoting here.
Shout
out to our sound team for those plosives. Sorry. Real statistics. Call us back when you have real statistics. Email us. I would love to see a number. TV@atheist-community.org. I will be sitting here with bated breath, desperate to see that research study, because I have spent so much of my career trying to find those numbers that everybody says are out there that I swear to you do not exist. I will read them on air. You have my word right now, Dre. If you email anything even remotely resembling the statistics that you claim you have, I will read them on air. You have my word. Other than that, thank you for calling. Please keep thinking on it.
Yeah, thank you for calling in. We love to hear back from you, and I hope you have a good rest of your Sunday.
Whew, Ben, I didn't mean to get too turned up towards the end of it, but it started to resemble sort of the worst of the backwater 4chan-y, I guess, Twitter X now conversation that our culture seems to be having, that you and I were even touching on before the show, about how there's this idea that anybody whose sex life doesn't look like, the Cleavers is somehow grooming children, is somehow going to be like violent or predatory towards kids or towards other marginalized people. And I just get so angry at this notion that something that our society is uncomfortable with is inherently evil and the source of every bad thing that's ever happened.
And it just makes me laugh too every time we get a caller that wants to try to explain to us the statistics about something like this, and they have no idea that they're talking to an expert in the field that has been studying sex and how humans like respond to sexual stimuli and all that. Like, it's hilarious that they want to present that and not give any statistics. It's just funny to me.
Yeah, no, I love, I mean, it's so nice when you have it in such a tight bow, because that conversation is reflective of almost every conversation I have about pornography in my work as a therapist, because so often people will come in and they'll say, well, I really want to argue this from a secular standpoint. I'm not being roped in by my old religious beliefs. But then when you start to scratch the surface or push back on any of this quote unquote accepted knowledge, you realize that no, it just devolves into religious moralizing again.
Yeah. And again, like Christy already mentioned, but just for anybody else out there, if you've got debates on this particular point, or if you have studies that would suggest that porn is bad and that this pipeline exists, then you can send an email to tv@atheist-community.org and let us know what you think about that. And also, if you just want to send us feedback in general, you can send to that same email. You can tell us what you like and what you don't like about the shows. You can tell your least favorite host to fuck off if you really want to, because somebody will send us that email probably. Or if you just want to say hi, that's also a way that you can do that. And if you want to know more about what's going on in the atheist community, you can go to www.atheist-community.org, where you can learn more about the ACA, its policies, and how you can get involved. And I know earlier we talked a little bit about the top 5 patrons of the week. I feel like it's a good time in the show to read those names off. I know you might have to scroll up a little bit. Christy, would you like to read off the top 5 for this?
Yeah, of course. As always, in our number 1 spot is our friend Dingleberry Jackson, followed closely by Ayame, Oops, All Singularity, Devor Valjean, and number 5 spot is held by Kalevi Helveti. Honorable mention this week is and the number 6 spot is our Lord Trilobite.
Amazing. And
if you want, folks,
if you want your name on that list, we already talked about it, but you can go to the Patreon and compete for one of those top spots, and maybe your name will be read out next week. All right. Well, we have some more calls on the line. I think, you know what? This is just turning into a porn episode, and I really don't mind that.
Yeah, here for it.
Let's do it. Let's talk to Slave of Christ, he, him from Texas. All right, Slave of Christ, you are on the air. What would you like to talk about?
Hi, Christy, Powell. Hi, Ben. We've spoke before, if you remember, from the sound of my voice.
I do, yeah. Just because we've been kind of circling this issue a little bit already today, when we talk about pornography being bad, can you just start by kind of telling us what does bad mean? Bad for society, bad for health, bad for offending God? Like, what makes it bad?
Well, there's okay. This was like my basic argument. I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires, which wage war against your soul. That's in 1 Peter 2:11, 1 Corinthians, also in 1 Corinthians.
Before you jump into another verse, can I boil down what you're saying to porn is wrong because God says it's wrong?
No, that's not my argument. My argument is when you consume those materials, you're more likely to fall into fornication. And I have I actually could cite.
Why is fornication bad?
Yeah, define fornication. Define fornication for me and tell me why I would not want to fall into it.
Okay, fornication means there's a order of God, which means God only wants us to enjoy pleasure within a marriage circle, right? So,
right. So I'm
in that
pushing back
circle-
here. I'm interrupting you because I asked you like less than a minute ago, does this boil down to porn is wrong because God says it's wrong? And it sounds like you're about to tell me that porn is wrong because is that right?
No, I was about to cite you research that in the Christian community, having relations outside of marriage is rising, and there is a link or a connection with pornography conception.
So, slave of Christ, hold on. The problem here is that you're asserting that watching porn is going to make you more likely to fornicate, and that the study then that you're hold on, and that the data is now saying that there are more Christians that are having sex outside of marriage, but you still haven't communicated why that's a problem. I don't see why sex outside of marriage, when it's consensual between adults, is a problem.
Okay, so there's like after we die, we will all face the judgment seat of Christ, right?
I don't believe any of that. Slave of Christ. Slave of Christ. I don't believe.
God says it's wrong.
I don't believe any of that is true. Why is, other than, can you give a non-religious reason why having sex outside of marriage is wrong?
Okay. First of all, the issue is not you having relations outside of marriage. The issue, the bigger
what is the
issue is it will you will end up harming your own self, your physical.
How does having sex outside of marriage harm myself?
Because it will affect your day-to-day life, the way you interact with other people.
How? Give me specifics.
Okay. You have to respect other people, right? You should not.
But it is what
people.
Slave of Christ. I'm saying that. So let's have two people, and they want to have sex, and they both are in the right state of mind. They are not impaired in any way, and they both say they're both over the age of consent, so they are both adults, and they both say, "Hey, I want to have sex. Let's go have sex." And then they do. How is that impacting their reactions to other people negatively? That seems like they had an adult discussion and they both agreed to do this activity, and they were both consenting to it, and they were both respecting each other in the way that they went about this. I don't see how that's a negative interaction.
Yeah, my calling is not about, like in general, it's not about pornography. It's about fornication and objective.
And we're asking you to tell us why so you're dodging the question, because we asked you why porn was wrong, and then you went to fornication, and then we asked, and then we asked you why fornication was wrong, and then you said it's bad because it will impact your day-to-day life and will negatively impact how you interact with other people. So you made that claim. Now I need you to give specifics about what negative things are happening in those interactions, and how is that caused by fornication. You have to demonstrate that.
Okay. So okay, let me ask you this question. Are you white?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I don't see
you can't just go asking people if they're white.
I don't see what this has to do with anything.
Okay. I'm darker skinned. That's why I'm asking you this.
That has nothing to do with anything, though. Okay. What does that have to do with having sex with people outside of marriage?
Okay. What I'm saying is, there's this issue of, certain races are going outside of their race to get married and, being more attracted to the other race. And that
do you believe
results? Okay,
hold on. Do you believe that that's a problem? I don't see a problem with that.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying that's a problem. What I'm saying is objectifying others and disrespecting others, especially when it comes to disrespecting other races and objectifying.
But that's not necessarily what's happening. I gave you. Hold on. We're not talking. Like, I would agree that that objectifying people is a problem if you're engaging in sex with somebody that does not want to do that, that is sexual assault. And that is bad. That is a crime. That is absolutely immoral. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about two consenting adults that want to have relations and that they do. These are totally different scenarios.
Okay, why do white people objectify us?
This is not related to the topic.
Afield. You called in to say porn was wrong, and we are 7 minutes deep into this conversation, and we've covered the gambit, but we haven't actually talked about anything. So, Slave of Christ, I'm a little bit worn on patience. We're towards the end of the show. I'm just going to say it very plainly. Will you please give me a 30-second elevator pitch on the concept of why pornography is bad? And if you can do that, we can continue this conversation. If you refuse to, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The first is it is the main cause of people to get sex addict. The second will be, it is more likely that they will commit unprotected sex. The third will be the damage of the family. When people are consuming such materials, they're more likely to be unloyal to their mates or partners. The fourth will be like the religious one, where people will betray their religious ideas like Christianity for such desires.
Okay, so I'm just going to go down the row here really quickly. Pornography causes sex addiction. Not true. There's no such thing as sex addiction. It's a complicated issue. We tried really hard to cover it well on secular sexuality and other places, but I'm just going to say it plainly here. Sex addiction is not a real thing, so I'm throwing that out. You said it leads to more risky sex, that watching pornography leads to like failing to use contraception and stuff like that. Hard disagree. I have seen over and over and over, and the statistics seem to bear out, that people who are engaged with their sexuality, people who are not shameful about their sexuality, people who are not uncomfortable with pornography and things like that, are going to be much more informed about sexuality. It only makes sense. If you are comfortable talking about sex, then you're not going to feel weird or squigged out going to a doctor and having an STI check, for one thing. You said that porn leads to cheating, which no. I mean, how would you know that? There's certainly no statistic to support that. And there's plenty of reason to believe that in many cases, people are able to enjoy pornography as a way of avoiding cheating, as a way of having a healthy form of sexual expression within the confines of a otherwise monogamous relationship. And then finally, you said that porn leads to betraying God, which is what I knew you were going to say when we first started this call, because it's what everybody has been saying so far on this topic. And I don't care about betraying God. There is no God. And so I'm very happy to disappoint him in this way. If you don't have anything else, Emmanuel, I feel like I have covered everything that you've had to say. And in the last 10 minutes, I don't feel like we've gotten very far.
Do you have any question or something like that?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, I think we're ready to move on. We're almost done with the show. Okay. So thanks for calling in, and we're going to move on. And I did want to mention, because I know I didn't say this earlier. I know I said that the tickets for the Bat Cruise were sold out, but it's still okay, because even if you can't make it to specifically the Bat Cruise, if you're in Austin or the surrounding area and can be at the library on August 27, 2023, you can still join us for the live shows of Talk Heathen and AXP. Talk Heathen will be hosted by Forrest Valkai, J. Mike, and Jamie Forbes. The Atheist Experience will be hosted by Johnny P. Angel, Forrest Valkai, and J. Mike. Doors open at noon, and we hope to see you there. So even if you can't make it to the Bat Cruise, or you didn't get your tickets in time, you can still make it to the library, which is super, super fun. I highly, highly recommend you get out there for a show at least once. It's a great time. And I'm excited to see each show hosted by 3 different people, that should be an experience.
Yeah, no, it'll definitely be a lot of strong voices. So that's a good time I'm looking forward to.
All right. I think we're going to move on from the porn talk to talk about a little bit different content. So I know if anyone's in the audience says like, I didn't come here to watch a show on porn, well, we're going to take a call now.
That is such an atheist stereotype, by the way, like peace loving, dope smoking, porn watching atheist heathens. I get it.
Yeah. But anyway, we're going to talk to Billy from Texas, wanting to talk about humans are able to make simulated universes. And I'm really curious about this. Billy, what kind of give us your elevator pitch? I like how Christy said it before. Your 30-second elevator pitch about what you want to talk about today.
Hey, how's it going? I saw the first caller, and with the first caller, you said that the argument that we only have one universe, and so we don't know if they're if the if the force characteristics or cosmological constants were different, then we could possibly have a different universe or something like this. So there's no reason to think that fine tuning is a good argument or whatever. But the thing is we do have multiple. I mean, we only have one universe that we can experience, obviously, but we do have multiple universes. We do have many, many rolls of the dice that we do all the time. Even Einstein used to create simulated universes almost 100 years ago. That's how they determined that fine-tuning, that the universe is fine-tuned, and that if those characteristics were different, that the universe, in most cases, the universe itself would not exist, not just life wouldn't exist.
So Billy,
yeah, that's my argument.
Those are like, yeah, so we have some simulations, right? But those are theoretical, right? We don't have those universes in reality that we know of, correct?
I mean, obviously, we don't know of multiple, like, physical universes.
So,
correct.
When you run into the post hoc problem as well, like the
yes.
fact that we're looking at it from this side of the event. But please, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing is that like we can theorize a lot of things, but there's a big difference between theory and actual experimentation and actual evidence, right? Like I can think something in my brain and I can do a logic, but just because I did a logic doesn't mean that that logic is going to play out that same way in reality. Because again, there are a lot of variables that we might not know about yet. And so if I say, yeah, I'm accounting for all the variables that I know about, and maybe I give some leeway for some unexpecteds, but either way, we're not going to be able to test those in reality to verify whether or not it's true. And that's why theory kind of, like at least this kind of theory just kind of stays in theory until we can find a way to really demonstrate that. So that's why when I say like we cannot statistically like actually prove this, we don't have a way to. We have an n=1, and even if we have a theoretical alternative, it's theoretical, and we see this even. I use medicine frequently as examples because that's my field. So like we've had different hypotheses over and over throughout like the history of medicine. And I can guess like, oh, I think that this particular medication is going to be good for this person because I understand this physiological process to a certain extent, and this is what I can guess it's going to do. There have been so many times where we've tried things like that and we've gotten a different outcome than what we expected because we just didn't know something. And so if I made decisions in medicine based only on theory and not based on experimental evidence, I could potentially hurt somebody, right? And so like there's a danger into relying on theory and making decisions based on theory alone because we have all of those variables. And that's like, so I think I like to throw on the phrase like it's mental masturbation to an extent because it's like, it's fun, it's great. Like I enjoy having those discussions, but then there becomes kind of a problem when we take this and say, I'm going to make decisions for myself and other people based on just this theory, right? And depending on what the theory is too, like there might be differences in the degrees of consequences. But that's kind of my pushback is that this is all theoretical. So I don't think it's a good I don't think it's a good reason to then say that the fine-tuning argument is a good argument.
Well, I think that's the reason. That's the reason why we use simulations to do these to evaluate this, because obviously we can't experiment. We cannot create universes and in physical reality. So we have to do it using supercomputers like a lustrous TNG 300. Whenever we created that simulation, and we used, because we have a lot of information about the variables, we know a lot of information.
We know a lot, but do we know, are there variables, Billy, are there variables that we wouldn't know about? No, Billy, because I'm not going to let you keep smuggling in points. We're going to address the points as they come, because otherwise we start assuming that what you said was correct and you're able to just go off of those assumptions. And I don't want to go off of those assumptions. So even with a supercomputer or anything else, there is still data that cannot be accounted for with that, right? Because there are things that we don't know. Right.
But we can make simulations that match what we see in reality right now using
to
the
an
variables
extent
that we know of.
To an extent.
No, the lustrous
right?
TNG 300 almost identically matches with what we see in reality.
To an extent, that from what we see in reality, right? We don't know everything in reality, right? We don't. So is there still room for error in these simulations?
We know enough to know that
we know enough. You're saying we know enough about the universe to not have error in our simulations.
Well, we know
all models are wrong. You know, all models are wrong. Some are useful.
Physics. We know enough about physics to know that if certain force characteristics are different by a small amount, then the universe itself would not exist. So, it
would not necessarily. I'm going to push back on that. It may not exist in the way that we currently experience reality. There are certain things, like there are a lot of variables. If we changed, we might get a result that we just didn't know was possible. And this isn't saying that I believe in those universes. I'm in the camp of we don't know what the possibilities are. We don't have a way to actually determine the probability. We can make guesses, we can make theories, but that's not.
We've been doing it for 100 years, though. I mean, you don't think that we've.
But you think? Do you think, Billy? Do you think that the things that we know now are going to be the exact same things that we consider to be true, like 100 years from now, or even 1,000 years from now? Do you think our science is so good right now that it's not going to be corrected in the future?
I mean, I don't go about. I can't go on future knowledge because
we don't know. The most honest thing you can say right now is to say we don't know. Right.
Right. But there are things that we do know. You do believe that there are things that we do know, though, right?
Yeah, there are things that we are confident. There are things that we are confident in.
Yeah, and we also don't know how many attempts, quote unquote, there were at the creation of a universe. And even that word creation is really problematic. There is a singularity that exists that we cannot look past right now. And to suggest otherwise is just using God as some excuse to fill in all of the gaps. Again, this idea of post hoc rationalization comes up where we say, well, the universe exists. And as far as we can tell, in order for a universe to exist, it has to have these components. So therefore, God, it doesn't work out that way. You don't know how many possibilities there were for all of this to happen. And to suggest that it proves anything is a little off point.
Well, there are two other possible or possibilities. One is the eternal inflation, and then the crunch down effect, which is where, like, if gravity was too strong by one part,
these are all hypothetical.
The universe would. Well, no.
These are all hypothetical. We don't have realistic evidence that these are happening. We have theory and we have hypothetical situations. But it sounds like you are like taking these hypotheticals and then considering them to be just as good as like experimental reality.
I mean, it's the best we can do. though. We can't make universes.
But the best we can do does not mean that it's sufficient to prove the point, right?
So do you think that these simulated models have any value at all?
I think they have some value. I don't think they have the value you're giving them. I think that it's a step to learn about things. And I do think that theory is a good way to start asking questions. Like, I think that there is value to theoretical questions and theoretical models. There's definitely value. But the problem is when you're saying that the value is greater than it actually is. And that's what I'm pushing back on. Because I think theory gets you to the point of asking the question and figuring out how we could demonstrate it in reality. But until you make that step to actually demonstrate it in reality, we're limited in what conclusions we can draw from it. And that's what my pushback is. And I'm a little bit curious, Billy, like what is your background?
So until we can make universes in reality, then you don't believe that any experimental data that we create, in supercomputers and stuff like that. I think
if we could make experiments, and if we could make a convincing experiment, I might change my mind. But the problem is everything you've mentioned is theoretical. So, and I don't know what it would take to convince me that we have enough evidence. But if someone brought that evidence, I might be willing to change my mind. But Billy, what is your educational background on this particular field?
I don't want to talk about me. I'd rather talk about my argument.
No, I'm curious. Like, are you a physicist? Like, are you in some branch of science? Like, what is your education on this?
I prefer to stick to my argument and not talk about me personally. I think that's
it matters.
Argument seems to lack any sort of credentialing.
Yeah.
It seems to lack any sort of sophisticated understanding of these models that we're discussing. You point out that these models have been around for 100 years. So what? I'm unimpressed by all of this, and I think that to continue to say, I'm not trying to mischaracterize what you're saying. But what you are saying is that these models prove, and that feels really weak.
Well, I mean, they come up, they present conclusions. They present hypothetical.
They present discussions. And when someone writes a paper and they have a conclusion section of their paper, that isn't necessarily saying that they actually provided a whole lot of evidence. Like, they might claim in their conclusion that is what happened, and that's a different story. But just saying that a study has a conclusion written in it doesn't mean that they actually concluded that there's evidence for X, Y, or Z. And like what Christy is saying, the reason why I'm asking you about your background is I think the level of confidence you have in certain things is not the level of confidence that many scientists would have. And I think a lot of scientists approach these issues with more caution. And there's a reason why you get a lot of conservative language in studies of saying, like, under these very specific circumstances, this might be something that happens, or this might be related. This might be a correlation. This might have a causal relationship. Like, there's very rarely are they going to say that they are like 90-something% confident that this is a causal relationship. Like it tends to be a lot more conservative in how confident they are in these claims. And so that's why, and I see this a lot with lay people, especially, will take in information and kind of misread what the data is saying and misread what the discussion is happening. A lot of times it's trying to lead to more study to be done on this. So
can I ask, how did you determine my confidence level in my argument?
Based on what you said,
why are you saying that I seem so extremely confident? Like, I think my confidence
because you made,
I don't know, 85.
Because Billy, you made the argument that we've studied this for 100 years, and that the supercomputers are like as close to reality as we can get, and then therefore we can make these big conclusions. Like you've said,
you compared them to like actually having a universe. You said we have these simulated universes.
Okay, well, that's the argument that
go back
and
listen to the beginning of the call.
That is the argument you made.
Find the point where you actually proved anything.
What I said was that illustrious TNG 300 matches with what we see in reality. When they run that simulation, it does match with what we see in reality. So I didn't say that that's as good as we can get, but it does match with what we see in reality. If you can look it up.
So what was your point? So what was your point in bringing that up then?
Well, I mean, in that part of the conversation, we were talking about, the precision of these simulations. So, and they're pretty good.
Right. And you displayed a lot of confidence that the simulations could accurately account for variables in reality that would make you convinced that the universe is fine-tuned. Yeah, we plug in the variables that we account for, but there are plenty of variables that we don't account for. And so that was my point. And it seemed like your level of confidence is higher than mine.
Wait, how do you know that? How do you know that?
Because there's always variables that we can't account for. There's always variables we can't account for. And so this is, again, Billy, this is why I think that, this is why I tend to think that you don't have as much foundation in this, because it's extremely overly confident and inaccurate with reality to say that we've accounted for all variables.
Wait, but you're just saying that there are always variables that we're accounting for. How do you know that?
Yeah, I am saying that.
That we. Yeah, I mean,
that's the nature of models. That's why it's a simulation rather than actual
because
experience.
We don't know everything, and the computers that we build don't know everything. We cannot know everything. There are very few things that I will make an absolute statement about, but that is one that we do not know everything.
We know enough to make simulations that closely.
And again, simulations are not actual reality. They are theoretical, and I think we're not getting anywhere with this call. So I think we're
right.
Yeah, I mean, these simulations are pretty good, Ben. Like, don't put words in his mouth. He's not confident in them. They're just pretty good. I don't know what to do with any of this. The fine-tuning model is well debunked.
Yeah.
You guys have a good day. It was very nice talking to you guys. I appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, take care. Thank you.
Calling in. All right, we are going to go a little bit over because there's one caller left, and I really want to get to them.
Sure.
So let's talk to Romi, she, her in Israel. It sounds like you want to talk about losing your friends losing their religious beliefs. Can you tell us just really quickly kind of about what led to this call?
Okay, so I've been an atheist for a long time. And one of my friends recently, who used to have like arguments and debates with me all the time, have told me that she's sort of losing her religion in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because a few analogies and examples I gave her, which I'm fine with. That is completely fine, you know. Everyone's on their own journey. And I was on that journey as well. I'm an atheist, and I support that truly. However, it is causing her great distress. And it's one of my first friends who ever been through something like this. And I know how hard it is myself, going from being Jewish and being in a religious school, and then slowly, because of scientific evidence, and just slowly going through my own journey. So I don't really know how to deal with this, because I kind of feel like I'm guilty, and I don't know how to approach debates like this in the future, considering what I feel, in a sense. And that's basically it, because religious people tend to test their beliefs if an atheist is around. And that's pretty much it.
No, I hear that sense of like personal responsibility and guilt here. And I guess I just want to speak to that piece of it first. If you were out about town and you saw your best friend's partner touching or being intimate with somebody who is not your best friend in a situation where you know that's cheating, where you know that that's not okay, and you go and tell your friend about what you saw, they're going to be hurt. And if you're a dick about it and you're like, you're not going to believe what I saw, then yeah, you're being cruel and unkind. But you don't need to feel guilty about what you're sharing if what you're sharing is true. You know, the fact that your friend is being hurt in that scenario is because they were being cheated on, not because you shared that with them. And the fact that your friend is going through this deconversion experience, I appreciate why there might be a sense of guilt. And yeah, it's not universally true that everybody would be happier after they lose their faith or after they deconvert, but it's also not your fault that they're going through this pain. This is the pain that comes from being lied to by your culture, by your society, by your authority figures, by your family. This is a pain that you did not cause. And I just want to start there, even as you're trying to figure out, well, how should I feel about all of this? And how can I offer some support in this challenging time? How does all of that land? Is that fair to say?
I guess it is. However, I do believe that our faith is just one aspect on which me and my friends used to disagree. You know, there's one thing if someone is like a hardcore right-wing Jewish person or a fundamental Christian, and they vote a certain way and they advocate for a certain thing. However, that's not the case with her. You know, so I guess I just don't see the benefit in it, considering the fact that she's been through so much. And I understand that knowing the truth is always better, of course. But that's why I feel guilty, because that's the kind of person where I don't mind if they remain in their faith, because they still do the right thing despite it. Whereas many people do not, and their faith causes them to do horrible, horrible things. And those are the people I should like put my efforts on, if I even put an effort on, you know? I don't know. It's just really confusing. And
yeah, I mean, you feel like you spoiled Santa Claus for somebody. And I get that. If you were to go into a kindergarten and just announce to all the children listening that there is no Santa Claus, dick move. Don't do that. And yet I feel no discomfort whatsoever sitting here on the internet in front of an audience of possibly thousands or more, talking about how there is no Santa Claus, because it's just true. And it's better for people to know that, generally speaking. If you were forceful or aggressive or unkind in the way that you sort of asserted these ideas, then, perhaps there are some apologies to be made. But if that's not the case, if this is just you speaking openly and honestly about things that are true, and it had an effect on somebody, you can still take some ownership and some responsibility for that impact. You can still offer care and support and resources and acceptance and everything else. But I would hope that you could give yourself permission to let go of any feelings of guilt or shame over the fact that you said true things to someone that is important to you.
And I really quick want to, I want to quickly jump in and say that this is a great place to recommend an organization that we talk about a lot. Recovering from Religion can help your friend probably, and you as well. If you're struggling with this particular issue and want somebody to talk to more in depth about how to move forward with your feelings on this, and also for your friend to be able to talk to somebody and work out kind of their feelings about their deconstruction and deconversion process, they're very good, and they have volunteers available at all times, and they can walk you kind of through that process of where to go next. So I can't shout them enough, but highly recommend you and your friend go to the link is here at the bottom of the screen. If you're interested in that, highly recommend for both of you.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else we can help you with today?
No. Thank you very much.
Well,
it's been a lot.
I certainly hope. Yeah, glad to hear it. I certainly hope that you can find some peace in all of this. And just remember that, yeah, there is pain here. There is distress here. But that pain comes from living in a society, existing in a culture that is riddled with lies and magical thinking. You, Romi, Ben and I, none of us caused that pain. we're just trying to do our small part in being part of the cure. Thank you so much for giving us a call and trusting us with your story today.
Yeah, thank you so much for calling in. I'd love to hear back from you about how it all goes in the future, if you feel comfortable, of course. So,
sure thing.
All right, have a good rest of your Sunday. And that was the last call of the day. So, how do you think it went today, Christy?
Hey, I mean, it was a good time. There are legitimate confusions, complications, like things to be upset about with regards to pornography and sex work. I mean, there's so many real things to be really angry about. And I am, I guess, just still crossing my fingers, waiting for the day that somebody calls in with something other than because God said so.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's why we're here doing a show like this, because and all the time Talk Heathen has been a thing. Very rarely has somebody attempted an argument about porn and not relying on a religious argument, but we're still not convinced that porn's a bad thing. So you can always call in the future if you've got some inspiration now and you really want to have the conversation. You can also call into AXP, which will be on this afternoon, if you still have some burning thoughts about porn and really want to bring that up there as well. But if you like the show today, and if you like what you see on all the other ACA channels, you can get these shows all of the time. We have 2 24/7 live streams, AXP TV delivering a constant stream of shows, clips, and specials over the 26 seasons of the Atheist Experience. And now we have Talk Heathen TV, or it's called Heathen TV, that provides you clips from Talk Heathen. You can watch or listen and watch your favorite hosts and discover some hosts that you've never heard of. You can visit tiny.cc/AXPTV and tiny.cc/HeathenTV to join in on that. And just a reminder, the prompt for this week is, what is a prayer request that would raise eyebrows in a place of worship? Reply in the comments and tune in at the beginning of next week to hear the top 3 answers. You can also, again, show some support, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Those are some easy, free ways to support the content and help us get out to more people. And if you are able to contribute financially, you can become a member by clicking the join button below the video. You can support us on Patreon at tiny.cc/PatreonTH. And don't forget that you can watch all of the shows of the ACA, or I guess not watch them, you can listen to them in audio podcast form. I guess you can try to watch, if you can figure out how to watch an audio podcast, we need to talk about.
Are you reading when you listen to an audio book? Yeah. Like we need a more developed language. English has some it has some gaps.
Indeed, but you can find the audio podcast at tiny.cc/AEN podcast, and you can become part of the Talk Heathen community in our fan run Facebook page at tiny.cc/FBTHG. And if you want to continue the discussion, you can join us in ACD, our fan run Discord, at tiny.cc/ACD Discord. And we're going to head over there after the show today for a few minutes. So be sure to stop by. And of course, there are some very important people working nonstop behind the scenes to make us look as good as we do on this show. So let's go to the crew cam. Thank you for everything that you do, crew. Always good to see you supporting us from behind the scenes. We could not do it without you.
Love that secular sexuality shirt. Just got to shout that out.
Oh, yes. It's a great shirt.
Check out the back catalog. We talk a lot about pornography.
Oh, absolutely. If you want to watch more shows related to porn, you can, and I said related to, not specifically porn, but talking about porn. Pretty much any show that Christy is on, I'm sure there's some mention of porn.
Just Google me.
Let's throw out some love rings for the audience.
Oh, wait.
Our magic isn't working. God, we didn't pray hard enough before the show, and so that's
there we go. All right.
We figured it out. Thank you to all of our viewers. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to Christy and me talk about porn for like 90 minutes. It's been a great time. And whether or not you believe if you're an essential worker, please continue what you're doing. I hope you've got some positive outlets. And if you have a really hard job, that you go out and do every day or even most days of the week, and you need some time for yourself, it is okay to masturbate. In fact, if that helps you get through your week, we highly recommend that you take some time for that. Of course, in appropriate context and not around anybody that does not consent. Just make sure,
be
you know,
smart,
you're being
be
responsible.
safe, be kind, but give yourself a big old orgasm.
Yes, give yourself a big old orgasm. And if you don't believe, this is your community. So if you want to talk about porn in the ACD after the show, feel free to do that. We're a great community for talking about these things. Go to the Facebook group, have some fun with each other consensually and safely. This is just becoming a sex ed outro at this point. And if you do believe, we don't hate you.
We're just not convinced.
Bye, everyone.
We want the truth, so watch Truth Wanted live Friday at 7 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTW and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/calltw.